Hi everybody, I'm Diana from Sew Outside the Box. I just wanted to pop in today to show everyone my face. I'm often not on camera anymore. It's easier to shoot the videos without having to do this intro bit. But I did want to pop in today to say Happy Canada Day to my fellow Canadians. And in honor of my Canadian heritage, today we're going to sew up this Canada flag table mat. And it's really easy to sew. It's got a lot of different parts to it. I hope you follow along and sew it up with me. And if you've been watching for a while, I just want to thank you for being here. I hope that you're getting something out of the sewing videos and the patterns and tutorials that I'm doing. I'm having a really fun time making them, and I'm looking forward to doing more. So thanks for being here. Let's get sewing. Okay, so here's a close-up of the table runner, and you can see it's an applique project, and it has some free motion quilting and some regular quilting. So the free motion quilting is totally optional, but if you feel like you want to, you can give it a try. Okay, so after I print the 2 pattern pages, I'm going to use this test square to measure 1 inch. If my measurement is spot on, then I know my pattern has printed correctly, and if it's off, then I need to check my printer settings and make sure I'm printing at actual size or 100%, just to make sure that my applique is the size that I want it to be. Okay, and this looks good, so I'm going to trim the paper on one side and tape my applique shape together. Then I'm going to bring in my Steam-A-Seam light and trace the shape onto the yellow grid side of the fusible web. And then I rough cut around the shape, and I'll set it aside. It's ready to go for when I need it in a bit. So I'm not going to go through cutting all my fabric on camera because the exact amounts are in the instructions. But I will say that I have my fabric folded in half, and all my cuts are being made in the order listed in the instructions. So my first cut is 13 inches by the width of fabric, and from that I can cut the backing fabric and the applique fabric. And then the rest after that is very straightforward. And I'm using double-sided fusible, which I love this product, and it's super easy to cut. I just lay the backing fabric on top and then I cut around it. Okay, now on to the sewing. So I line up my raw edges of the side flags with the main fabric, and I'm just using clips to hold them in place, and then I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then when seams are sewn, I press both sides to the red side. I want to place my applique on the red fabric now. I have to peel the paper back from the fusible web and then place it on the red. And it's on the back side of the red, but with this fabric, it's hard to tell the front from the back. I want the glue to adhere to the fabric, so I'll just run a hot iron quickly over the top, and then when it cools, I can cut carefully around the shape. And then I peel the grid paper away and place my maple leaf applique right in the very middle of the white square. And then once it's where I want it, I use the hot iron again over the top of it, and this applique will be permanently attached. And now I'm going to attach the front flag and the backing fabric to the fusible fleece. And in the same way, I'm just running my hot iron from the middle toward the edges on the front and the back. And I'll use a pressing cloth when I get to the edges, otherwise I'll end up with fusible sticking to the bottom of my iron, and that creates a big mess. Okay, the fusible fleece is attached and I'm ready to take it to the machine. Okay, I'm using this scrap fabric to test out a few stitches, and I've decided on a really basic zigzag, and I'm going to go around just on the very inside edge of the applique. And you can see I've sped up the footage quite a bit for the camera, but I want you to know that I actually sew very slowly as I'm sewing around applique. There's lots of stopping, starting, and lifting the foot and turning on the needle just to get it exactly right. I'm just going to quilt straight lines in the red parts, and I'm not marking my lines. I'm using the edge of my sewing foot as a guide, and I'm eyeballing it. So it may be slightly less accurate, but I think I can live with it. And now for the tricky part. I'm going to free motion quilt in the white section, but if you don't want to free motion quilt this part, you could echo quilt around the leaf. You could do a large square around the white section, or maybe even something inside the maple leaf. Just try what you feel comfortable with. Okay, and now because I am going to do the free motion quilting, I usually just warm up with a little practice. I'm not super awesome at free motion quilting, but I do like it and I want to get better, so I continue to practice. And I just make my little loops around, and I'm trying not to have any hard turns, and I'm trying to keep it moving and go in a circular way. And that's how I do it, that's how I practice, and then we'll see how it all turns out. Okay, so I've done my practice, and now here I am going to start right on the white section. And I just tell myself, don't be afraid. I've sped this up again. I'm going a lot slower than what you're seeing here on the camera. I do stop and start quite a bit just to make sure I'm where I want to be. And I just keep her moving. And then I just want to remind you, you can hear from the sound the machine is making that I've sped this up quite a bit. I'm actually going quite a bit slower, and I'm not afraid to stop and start. So if you're taking the plunge into free motion quilting, I encourage you to go for it. This is by no means perfect, but it ends up looking really cute. So I hope you try it. Okay, I've squared up my table runner, and you can't see any of my mistakes in free motion quilting, and now I'm ready to add the binding. Okay, here I am at binding. I only need 2 strips to go around this mat, so I'm going to do this quickly. If you need a straight binding refresher, I'll post a link, and there's also a link, a QR code in the instructions. And then after I finish sewing it, I'm just going to trim that little bit and then fold it, press it, and bring it back ready to bind. So the trick with this binding is that I want it to begin and end on one side where I think it will be less noticeable. So that means I need to start my binding leaving a long tail, but starting the stitching near the bottom. So I start with a few stitches and a back stitch, and then I'm right here at the first corner, and I stop at 1/4 inch away from the edge. I use the 1/4 inch mark on the front of my piecing foot to know where to stop, and then I turn the mat and I just sew off the edge. So I fold my binding away from my mat to make a triangle, making sure that the top edge of the folded binding is parallel to the bottom of the mat. And then I fold the binding back again toward the mat to complete that corner. Then I just put it back under the foot and continue sewing. Okay, so I'm around the last corner and I'm ending just an inch or so past that corner because I definitely need that long tail. Then I overlap the top tail with the bottom tail. Then I make a mark in the middle of both of those tails. Then I fold out the top tail and I match up the marks on the bottom and the top tails. I need to fold my mat in half to give me the space I need, and I actually need all the space because these tails still feel kind of short to me, but I think I can get this done. Then I sew a seam to connect the tails and I test it before I trim the extra just to make sure that everything lines up, and it does. So you can finger press it or take it to the ironing board. Okay, now I'm folding my binding over to the front, and I'm just going to finish up the binding by machine. And now here I am up at the corner of my binding, and you just straighten that binding out, and then I just fold the side binding up and it makes a neat little triangle. And then I just use my little tool here just to hold that little piece down as the foot moves forward and the needle also, just so it catches that binding before I turn it. Okay, everybody, that's it for this week's sewing video tutorial. Thanks for watching. I hope you really enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making this video. And if you did, please remember to like and subscribe. See you